Women are often called the fairer sex for many reasons. They are prettier and more graceful than us men, they are generally not as brash and boneheaded as we are, and the innate ability to bring life into the world requires greater virtue than could be possibly matched by any man, no matter how many goals you kill with the boys. But while men generally are the more violent sex, that is not always the case. Much like when a grizzly sees you going near her cubs, you would be very surprised what a woman is willing to do when it comes to seeking vengeance against someone who hurt her child. Let me give you an example. Marianne Bachmeier. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. But before we get into the mad lad, it is in fact your boy, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid has changed gaming on the move to provide you with the ultimate free-to-play handheld experience with over 80 million downloads and 650 unique champions for you to collect. You will conquer raids, dungeons, campaign battles and awesome bosses to build up and customise your champions along the way and take part in my personal favourite mode, the PvP Arena. One of the champions I have used many times is Galek from the Orc faction, purely for his pure damage output. He may not be the most powerful now out of the hundreds of champions to choose from, but he holds a special place for me in the arena. Once he is leveled and geared up, he can dish out hugely powerful attacks, and he looks pretty cool while he's doing it. And Raid's 4th anniversary is here, and there is a ton to get excited about. There will be dedicated offers, free gifts, promo codes, events, and a brand new fusion event where you can get your hands on an anniversary themed legendary champion. You will also be able to take a trip down memory lane with a recap video of your stats in Raid Shadow Legends. I'm looking forward to seeing my own PvP stats. Also, for Amazon Prime members who just got Genbo, keep an eye out for the next drop with some powerful Savage gear. It's available from now until the 30th of March. If you want a starting boost in Raid Shadow Legends, then hit the link down below or scan the QR code on the screen to get useful items such as energy refills, magic potions, XP brews, and you'll also get the epic Kill in the Shrike so you can summon a great champion as soon as you get into the game. And since it's Raid's birthday, the gifts just keep coming. All new and existing players can get a bunch of free birthday gifts. Once you're in the game, after clicking the links, just enter promo code 4YearsRaid to get your hands on 4 legendary skill tomes, plus other useful stuff. So use my link in the description box down below to download Raid Shadow Legends for free on your phone or PC. Once you are in and crushing your enemies, come find me in the game under the name of Count Dankula TV, and if you are fast enough, you can join my clan. Despite being fortunate enough to be born in West Germany, Marianne Bachmeier came from a very difficult background. Prior to her birth in 1950, her father had served in the Waffen-SS and seemed to relive what he probably saw as the good old days in his home life, because he was a drunken tyrant. Possibly due to having this terrible excuse for a father figure, Marianne ended up falling pregnant at just 16 years old, at which point her boyfriend then disappeared. But while the baby's father had run off, Marianne's father knew exactly what to do. He and Marianne's mother forced her to give the baby up for adoption. And if that doesn't sound awful enough, the exact same thing happened again 2 years later, except this time Marianne was sexually assaulted before giving birth. Fortunately, however, things eventually started to turn for the better. In 1973, when Marianne was 23 years old and still living with her parents, she gave birth for a 3rd time to a daughter named Anna. And this time, the slightly older Marianne was much better equipped to care for the little girl as a single mother. 3rd time lucky. But while she was able to raise Anna all by herself, any more children would have been just too much for Marianne to handle. So she got her tubes tied to prevent her from having any more children in the future. Fast forward to 7 years later, and the pair were living in Lübeck, where Marianne ran a pub to make ends meet. Life was still far from easy, but Marianne was devoted to giving her daughter the best life that she could. Overall, despite how tough things were, she and Anna seemed to have a fairly quiet life as their own little happy family, with Anna being described as a happy and open-minded child. But sadly, things were about to take a very dark turn. On the 5th of May 1980, Anna and Marianne had an argument because Anna wanted to go to the park, but Marianne insisted that she had to go to school. It's pretty standard parent-child bickering, but this particular fight ended up getting pretty heated because kids are little shits sometimes. And since children are prone to rebellion, after being sent out, Anna decided to skip school and go to visit a friend instead. Unfortunately, however, she never made it there, and her body ended up being discovered later that day. It didn't take long for Marianne to find out what had happened to her daughter, because the killer was quickly apprehended. Soon after, a 35-year-old local butcher named Klaus Grabowski confessed to Anna's murder. Grabowski was a known nonce who had previously been convicted of child molestation twice in 1970 and 1975. So he should have been rotting behind bars, or ideally, a lot worse. But he had managed to make a deal to get out of prison. After his second conviction, Grabowski was locked up in the state psychiatric hospital in Neustadt until he volunteered for chemical castration in 1976 in order to win his freedom back, which was a decision that literally took balls. Look, I'm sorry, see if I don't make jokes, I'm just going to get angry. Some sources say that Grabowski kidnapped Anna on her way to see her friend, while others say that Anna actually knew Grabowski and he lured her into his apartment with the promise of letting her play with his cats. But either way, Grabowski kept Anna in his clutches for several hours before he finally strangled her to death with a pair of his fiancée's tights. And then he put Anna's body into a cardboard box and took it out to a canal on his bike, where he dumped the body on the bank. How the fuck this absolute monster managed to get a fiancé, I have absolutely no idea. But fortunately, the fiancé did the right thing and immediately called the police as soon as Grabowski confessed to her what he'd done. This led to Grabowski's immediate arrest and confession. After a few months of investigation, Grabowski went on trial at the Lübeck Regional Court on the 3rd of March 1981, where he pled guilty to unpremeditated manslaughter. The first 2 days of the trial were pretty eventful, but despite Grabowski's history, it hadn't been determined for certain whether or not this sick fuck had actually sexually assaulted Anna in addition to murdering her. This was the early 80s, so forensics just weren't that great back then. But ultimately, that didn't matter. He had done enough to have the law come down on him like a ton of bricks. After all, this was clearly an open and shut case, right? Well, apparently not, because Grabowski seemed to have done one better than calling Saul. The defence claimed that while Grabowski had in fact killed Anna, it wasn't his fault because he was suffering from a hormone imbalance. You see, a urologist had actually helped to chemically uncastrate Grabowski with artificial male hormones after being told by Grabowski that the earlier castration had been done for exhibitionism. Basically, Grabowski told the doctor that he was castrated because he flashed someone, and not for outright noncery. And the urologist just didn't think to fucking check that he was telling the truth for some reason. The urologist justified carrying out the HRT by saying, As a medical professional, I was of the opinion that castration of a man at such a young age was unjustifiable. So, Grabowski had been chemically castrated for one of the most heinous crimes imaginable. Then he went out of his way to undo it and get his nonce drive back. Then he murders a little girl, and then he tries to say, whoops, sorry, not my fault, the hormones made me do it, and that's not even the worst thing that the defence pulled out of their arse. Grabowski's defence also had the absolute fucking gall to try and pin the blame for Anna's murder on Anna herself. That's right, it's the innocent 7-year-old girl's fault that a grown man kidnapped and strangled her to death. Of course. The defence actually claimed that Grabowski had gave Anna some money for some cola, and then Anna allegedly tried to blackmail him into giving her more money by threatening to tell her mother that he'd molested her, which resulted in Grabowski panicking and killing her because he didn't want to go back to jail. And I'm not even going to dignify that absolute steaming pile of bullshit with a comment. Fortunately, however, the judge rejected this absolute steaming pile of bullshit outright, because deep down, even government officials are human beings. Some of them are. But the defence's hormone story ended up throwing a wrench into things. The director of the criminal psychiatry department at the Psychiatric University Clinic Hamburg-Eppendorf had initially submitted a report saying that Grabowski was fully culpable for his actions. But he seemed to be on the verge of changing his mind after finding out about Grabowski messing around with his hormones. Naturally, Marianne was, of course, absolutely fucking furious about this revelation, and she made it known that she was considering filing a criminal complaint against the urologist for helping to chemically uncastrate a twice convicted child predator. Because why the fuck would someone do such a thing, and why the fuck would you not check first the reason why he was castrated in the first place? And since the trial was expected to last until February, she would have had plenty of time to do so. But those first 2 days were just far too much for Marianne to bear. So ultimately, she didn't go through with that complaint. She was fucking enraged by the defence's attempts to blame her 7-year-old daughter for Grabowski killing her. And Marianne just couldn't take it anymore. She said, "I heard he wanted to make a statement. I thought, now comes the next lie about this victim who was my child." So, Marianne decided to put a stop to Grabowski's lying once and for all. On the 6th of March 1981, it was time for day 3 of the trial, and determining the full extent of Grabowski's culpability for his actions was the first thing on the agenda. Just after 10 a.m, Grabowski, flanked by 2 sergeants, sat down at the defendant's bench with his back to some folding tables and chairs and a barrier, behind which Marianne was standing just 3 metres away. And then Marianne Bachmeier made what she thought of Grabowski's culpability abundantly clear. Now, I know that you all love that clip, and that's the one being shared everywhere on TikTok and Twitter, but I'm very sorry to rain on everyone's parade, but it's a scene from a movie about Bachmeier. It's not actual footage. But, of course, I'm still going to include it anyway, because the scene is just pretty fucking baller. But yeah, Marianne Bachmeier just pulled out a .22 caliber Beretta and emptied the entire thing into Grabowski, hitting 6 of the 8 shots that she fired, and shutting his lying mouth for good. Because, well, he might have been shooting blanks, Marianne wasn't. Hit or miss? I guess she doesn't miss, huh? It's just a shame she didn't have a wood chipper. Needless to say, everyone in the courtroom was rather shocked that the accused was, murdered right in front of them. After all, who would do such a thing? Well, at this point in history, the idea of someone murdering someone right in front of a judge in a courtroom was so inconceivable that Marianne was able to just walk right into the courtroom with a gun hidden on her. Also, the cops didn't think that she was actually capable of doing such a thing, so they just never bothered searching her. But right in the middle of the carnage, Marianne was as cool as a cucumber. After dispensing her own justice, she just casually let the gun slip out of her hand as she was grabbed and immediately arrested. She didn't even try to resist or defend herself. In fact, in the aftermath, she just straight up incriminated herself in premeditated murder several times. 2 cops said that they heard her call Grabowski a pig after shooting him, which is not a helpful thing for cops to hear you say in such a situation. Marianne just gave 0 fucks and reportedly uttered other little tidbits like, "I hope he's dead," and "because he killed my daughter." However, once the excitement died down and everyone calmed down a bit, Marianne did realise that she had made a mistake, and she quickly made it clear that she wished she could have done things differently, by saying, "Unfortunately, I only got the pig from behind." And she then elaborated with, "I wanted to shoot him in the face, but I shot him in the back." Marianne's only regret was not getting to look Grabowski in the eye as she murked him. While Marianne's motive for killing Grabowski was blindingly obvious to anyone that was paying attention, the cops still had to do their due diligence and investigate a bit, which naturally involved interviews with Marianne, where she said that she'd had visions of Anna throughout the trial, and that she even had a dream where she shot Grabowski in the face. "It came to me in a dream." Sorry, serious subject, that's not funny. Yes, it is. Her defence lawyer must have been having a really hard time because Marianne was just not trying to defend herself at all. In addition to interviews and a chat with a doctor, Marianne was asked to provide a handwriting sample, to which she obliged in a pretty heartbreaking fashion. She wrote, "I did it for you, Anna." And she drew 7 love hearts around it, 1 for each year of her daughter's life. Once all of the investigating was out of the way, Marianne was put on trial in 1982, and she was charged with murder because, well, she murdered Grabowski. But there was another reason for the murder charge. Grabowski didn't see it coming. You see, back then, during this time, West Germany had a bunch of weird laws, and this relates to a law dating back to 1941 that defines murder as killing done sneakily or treacherously, whereas killing someone to their face isn't seen as sneaky or treacherous because the victim can see it coming. So, a domestic abuser could beat his wife to death and go down for just manslaughter, but the wife could get done for full murder if she decided that enough was enough and stabbed the guy in his sleep. Naturally, there was a massive public outcry because this law was pretty fucking stupid. And Marianne didn't deserve the mandatory life sentence that goes along with a murder charge for shooting her daughter's unsuspecting killer in the back. And to be fair, she did want to shoot him in the face, but fortunately, the murder charge was downgraded to manslaughter 4 weeks later. Another thing that was being debated was the premeditation. Some people were arguing that just because she brought a gun to court doesn't mean she planned to kill him. She could have just so happened to have had a gun on her and then decided in that moment to kill him. This added the extra question of whether or not the killing was premeditated, and courts like to establish premeditation because it affects the charge and the sentence. Throughout all of the proceedings, Marianne continued to give zero fucks about the consequences of her actions and just looked smug as hell in court as they spent the next few days arguing about how based she was. That face is many things. Remorseful is not one of them. Eventually, the court made up its mind about what to do with Marianne, and on the 2nd of March 1983, she was convicted and sentenced to 6 years in prison for manslaughter and illicit gun possession. Thankfully, though, there were still some good ones out there. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, Marianne was dubbed Germany's revenge mother. And there was enough support for her out there that she managed to sell her story to a German magazine named Stern for about $158,000 to cover her legal fees. Marianne ended up serving half of her sentence before being released on parole, after which she got married and moved to Nigeria in 1988, though some sources say that she actually moved to Ghana. But sadly, nothing came of this bid to rebuild her life because she got divorced in 1990 and then moved to Sicily. Later in life, Marianne admitted on a talk show that she had actually planned to shoot Grabowski, which meant she had indeed committed premeditated murder. Not the smartest of things to say on TV, but guess what? Double jeopardy, bitch. They couldn't charge her again and retry her for the same crime, so she was free to say it. Years later, a friend of Marianne's even claimed to have seen her doing target practice in her pub's cellar in the run-up to the trial. Eventually, Marianne's luck took one last turn for the worse when she was sadly diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She returned home to Lübeck in the newly reunified Germany, where she passed away at the age of just 46 on the 17th of September 1996. After 16 years, Marianne was finally reunited with her daughter, and the two were buried together, sharing a gravestone. Marianne's legacy is somewhat complicated because the reaction to Grabowski's death was highly polarised, to say the least. Naturally, the massive debate over whether Marianne should have been charged with murder or manslaughter, or if she should have even ever been charged at all, was argued very widely in the public sphere. Further fueling this debate was Marianne's motive, because no one could agree on whether the fact that the killing was out of revenge for her daughter was a mitigating circumstance, or if it made the crime even more heinous. As one survey reported, 28% of Germans thought that 6 years was an appropriate sentence for Marianne, 27% thought that it was too harsh, and 25% of complete arseholes thought that it wasn't harsh enough. Unfortunately, some saw Marianne as nothing more than a cold-blooded murderer who just used Anna's murder as a pretext for a bit of vigilantism. Fortunately, however, many more people saw Marianne as a distraught mother who was suffering through something unspeakably awful, and she had lost so much that revenge was all she had left. The tragedy of Marianne's situation went a long way in gaining her sympathy, especially after they learned about her background. Even the centrists that condemned her actions couldn't help but feel bad for her. The German public sent her a lot of supportive correspondence, flowers, and even money for her legal fees, to the tune of 100,000 marks in the first week after the shooting. But despite this show of compassion and support, the story of Marianne's early life couldn't win over everyone, as the fates of her previous children did cost her quite a bit of support because her image was no longer squeaky clean enough for some moralists. Now, I know that you all like to hear what my opinion is on controversial subjects such as these, and You can probably guess what I think, because we have tread similar ground before, haven't we? And I might get some people who will say to me, Dank, that's not fair, what Grabowski did was no doubt horrendous, but he should have faced a fair trial. But hopefully you can forgive me, of all people, for not having much faith in the judicial process. Joking aside, however, while Marianne did admittedly lose a few style points, missing those 2 shots, she still got the job done. 10 out of 10, no notes. She had gone through literally the worst scenario that any parent could possibly imagine, and instead of falling to despair, she mustered the strength and will to get even. And I know that it's a cliche thing to say this, but I don't believe that most of Marianne's naysayers have had kids, because I can't really say that I know any parents that wouldn't do the exact same thing. After all, we can't expect God to do all the work. This is a joke. These are all jokes, YouTube, right? YouTube police, section 127, FBI, whatever. These are jokes. These are all jokes. I'm just shitposting. And look at how quickly Marianne Bachmeier and Gary Plauché dealt out justice for their children. Think about how much time, money and resources they saved the courts and the prisons, and therefore the taxpayer, by cutting out the need for a long and drawn-out trial and then a lengthy prison sentence. Even when it comes to getting rid of nonsense, the private sector wins yet again. In Minecraft, of course. And see, before I get any more nervous texts from my lawyer, don't do this stuff. Don't do anything that involves any kind of violence, right? Just let the police and the courts do their jobs. All of the stuff I said was just jokes. But wait, I hear you cry. Vigilantism is bad. They can't just take the law into their own hands. What if they get it wrong and kill an innocent person? This'll just inspire a lot of extrajudicial killings. Well then, anyone who kills an innocent person or frontier justices someone who wronged them a little bit too hard has just committed a crime, and they will be charged accordingly. Simple. I mean, it's not as if vigilantes have qualified immunity where they can run around killing and beating people and then just go, oops, my bad, and then get off scot-free. You're thinking of police officers. Now, you may be thinking, isn't that just the death penalty with extra steps? I thought you were against that. Well, there is a slight difference. I am very much against the death penalty for the sole reason that the state should not be trusted with the power to kill its own citizens for any reason, but also, while the debate over punishment versus rehabilitation in the justice system is obviously a very important one, I believe that the focus should also be on paying appropriate restitution to the victim. And in cases as monstrous as these, if proven beyond a reasonable doubt and the victim wants their restitution paid in blood and is willing to collect it themselves, I need to stop Fed posting. Otherwise I'm going to get like an angry call from a lawyer again. These are jokes, right? Everyone calm down. I'm joking. All memery and jokes aside, no, do not do this. No vigilantism, no extrajudicial killings, no violence, none of that stuff. Just sit back and let the police and the courts do their job. And I say that because you're not seeing the bigger picture. Let the police and the courts do their work and put all of these monsters in jail. Then, once they are all in jail, in a completely unrelated matter that has absolutely nothing at all to do with what I was just talking about, we should then advocate for the end of protective custody and protection wings, so that all prisoners are kept together in general population.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody subscribe.